resistance. As a psychologist, we know about dealing with resistance. Okay, number one. What are the obstacles to speaking out for mainstream Jewish leaders, institutions, and synagogues? I gave people 7 possible obstacles for respondents to rate and encouraged them to add others. Surprisingly, there was fairly strong endorsement of all of my options, and they were rated similarly by most synagogues and progressive organizations. I'm going to read them with the most significant obstacles first down to the least. Okay, number 1, obstacle, fear of appearing to undermine support for Israel. That's number 1. Number 2, fear of encouraging or appearing to endorse anti-Semitism, especially among the public. Number 3, fear of polarizing our own community, followed closely by a fear of undermining support for Israel for future generations. Next, having a chilling effect on large donors, which was more significant for progressive organizations than synagogues, but it didn't rate very highly. Next, fear of undermining political support for Israel, so among the government, at the government level. And next, fear of isolation from other Jewish groups. And finally, an added factor, that it's not a rabbi's place to speak out about Israeli politics, but it is their role to speak out about issues of religious pluralism. I think we need to listen to this one. I'm going to come back to it later on. Number 2, question. If you agree that ending the occupation and a 2-state solution is in Israel's best interest, what are the consequences of not publicly saying that? Again, there was considerable consensus on the possible consequences. 3 minutes. Already? Okay. Number 1. Face this. I'm going to do it in order of strongest to the least. Okay. Facing an increasingly fundamentalist Israel that may not be as attractive to the next generation. That's if you don't speak out, we're going to get more fundamentalism. Next, facing many of the previous obstacles because Israel may lose its status as a democracy. So all the other obstacles are going to come to pass. Okay, next, decreasing political support for Israel both at home and abroad. Next, proclamation of a Palestinian state by the UN without bilateral negotiations. Next, facing decreasing funding for Israel because the principles set out in the Declaration of Independence aren't being met. And another consequence that young liberal diaspora Jews will give up on both Israel and Judaism. Okay, I'm going to jump to the right. So far, what's our takeaway? What can we learn from this questionnaire that might act as a springboard for good strategic action planning? Number 1, there is agreement on the important obstacles. Speaking out may undermine support for Israel, especially among future generations, fuel anti-Semitism, and create deep divisions in our community. Also, there is consensus that not speaking out has negative consequences. Israel may not be attractive to those of us in the diaspora, especially the next generation. Israel becoming more fundamentalist and losing its status as a democracy was a strong worry for both synagogues and progressive organizations. So our task, what strategies best address these concerns in a constructive way, that's our task. Okay. So what strategic options might be most effective? Let's start with synagogues. Rabbis are at best ambivalent or uncomfortable about speaking out about political issues. They are concerned about issues of religious pluralism because that goes to Israel's identity as a homeland for the whole of the Jewish people. They feel okay about addressing that issue. They share a concern about increasing fundamentalism and polarizing their congregations. Of course, most of the respondents were reform or constructionists, although I did get some large conservative synagogues responding. Rabbis strongly endorsed the strategy of inviting outside speakers to reassure congregants, especially about Israel's security issues. They thought representatives of the military were good choices, telling everybody you're safe if we make peace. Next is rabbis felt that strengthening the focus of our federal government on the benefits of a 2-state solution, and Israel's remaining a democracy was really an important priority. The focus on the peace dividend, they felt should be done by other community leaders, not by them. Rabbis strongly endorse, this is a really interesting one, the idea of providing better education for youth in school programs to build more cooperative relationships, reduce stereotyping, and intergroup hostility. They thought that ought to happen both in Israel and in the diaspora. Okay. However, in North America, there are few programs to engage youth constructively in shared education and socializing across Jewish and Palestinian identities. Most meet for the first time in college or university, and the experiences are often very hostile. Israel Apartheid Week, BDS, not a recipe for building mutual recognition and support for peaceful Middle East outcomes. Rabbis also strongly endorse two options that deserve some consideration. The first is creating guidelines to protect them when they speak up. A sort of rabbinic statement of principles or policies, a code of acceptable conduct, some safety blanket for addressing those in their community who are highly polarized and would jeopardize their jobs or make them feel insecure. Rabbis like the idea of support groups for leaders to discuss strategies on an ongoing basis. How should we deal with this? Rabbis also endorse the idea of building bridges across organizations with different perspectives to increase understanding and create coalitions. It's something that J-Space Canada is doing. I'm here on behalf of J-Space Canada. This included the premise that being critical of some of Israel's policies might be the best way to express support for Israel in the long run. Just quickly turning to the Jewish organizations, I'm right at the end. Progressive organizations replied by highlighting the need to provide adult members, and especially youth, with more diverse points of view and facts about the political situation in Israel. They saw themselves as speaking out already, but also endorsed the idea of having some guidelines to better protect them when speaking up. What were the boundary lines so that they could still be halal or kosher and but not be rejected? There was some concern about losing big donors, but not a big emphasis, more of an emphasis on strengthening the message to the federal government about the benefits of two states. So now it's up to us to consider strategies as to who and how and what to target as we work to protect democratic Israel in keeping with the principles in Israel's Declaration of Independence. The vision is Israel working with a Palestinian partner to resolve the outstanding issues to achieve a long-awaited two states for two people, Jewish and Palestinian, with security, human rights protections, and a peaceful future for all its citizens, and all that by 5 o'clock today.